I'm Emile Woolf, and my wife Anita and I have been here. We're in our 19th year in this wonderful house, garden, and when we were looking for a house, we used to have a big place in the country. One of the most important ingredients was a room big enough for this monster. This is a Model D Steinway, which is the largest in the stable, and it has an amazing pedigree. It is 9 feet long, and so we had to have a room that could be used, and with this thing at full volume, and we were very lucky we found it. And so we have 2 rooms interleading that provide us with a wonderful venue for the 10 concerts a year that we run for charity, which my wife will tell you more about. But we can just about fit in 60 people, plus the musicians, and when we have a quartet or a quintet, then of course you can imagine that it can be quite crowded around the piano. But it's appreciated by hundreds of people all around here who come to these. Now the piano itself is a Steinway Model D. When the piano was made in '03, it was taken by Steinways, instead of putting it on public sale, it was taken by Steinways into what they called its stable for visiting musicians. So if any great pianist would come over to the UK to give concerts, he would go to the Steinway stable and try out all the pianos and choose the one that he liked. And this one was the favoured instrument of both Rachmaninov and Paderewski. So whenever they came to England to perform, this is the instrument that they chose. And these are still the original ivories, and nothing has changed in the piano at all. When you get a shot of the inside of the piano, you will see the amazing, intricate brass work and of course the strings. It was made by Steinways in Hamburg. They have only 2 factories in the world, one in Hamburg and one in New York, and this is one of the original German instruments. We measure the humidity and the temperature with this instrument here. It's called a hygrometer, and that tells us that at the moment the temperature in here is 19.6 degrees centigrade, and you've got the hygrometer tells us that we are humidity 50%, which is on the high side. It should be a bit lower than that. But I have a system here which you can see of green, amber, red. When it goes amber, I need to put more water in. When it's red, heaven forbid, it means the pads are drying out, pads underneath, and that does risk damage to the piano. So I have to keep an eye on that and top up the water tanks underneath that you've seen whenever the yellow light starts flashing.
Our eldest son was born severely deaf and disabled as a result of having contact with rubella and being given a vaccination which I should never have been given. When he was a baby, he was really deemed to be supremely mentally and physically backward, and they didn't think he had intelligence of a very, very low order. But we noticed that he had a brightness and a great curiosity, and gradually, over years of struggle and taking a more drugs and putting him onto homeopathy and one thing and another, he emerged with obviously great intelligence, but hampered by not being able to express himself in speech. In those days, they completely discouraged sign language. Somehow we lived in a period of great ignorance in terms of how to raise a disabled child. But we had one teacher who really understood Carl and taught him what they called Paget Gorman, which wasn't proper BSL, because that was banned in schools. So when he eventually grew up and insisted, when he was still at school, that he wanted to drive a car, the headmaster said, well, he might be able to drive in the grounds, but don't ever expect him to drive. He is now, I think he finally got his license after many attempts, and he is now a very proficient driver, and that gave him legs, and he has driven the length and breadth of England, actually, up to Cumbria to see his sister. So it was very clear to us that despite the lack of real education, which we feel his intelligence warranted, that he had an enormous curiosity and intelligence. So when he was adult, there weren't very many facilities available. We lived in the country for a while, and he helped me in my organic farm, delivering organic vegetables and one thing and another. But when things seemed to improve in London for disabled people, we came back. He then started going to deaf clubs and meeting deaf people, but unfortunately, because of his disability and the fact that he drove a car, he was taken a lot of advantage of by able-bodied deaf people, and he was severely bullied. And he actually had a breakdown at that point. The thing I really wanted to do was to find him a safe environment. Actually, was a centre which was set up in, I would say, the 70s, and it was a very thriving centre for disabled adults where they could receive training, therapy, art, pottery, or you name it. It was a terrific centre for adult disabled. But gradually the Barnet Council withdrew funding, or they could not fund it anymore, and they found a way of trying to make the centre, those who insisted that they wanted to remain there, having to have it run independently with a bit of council support. So by the time Carl got there, the centre had really run down, but he had found a haven with friends and a sense of safety because he'd had a really bad time. And I felt very strongly that really they should be doing something. They should be creating something. I know from my own point of view as an artist how therapeutic just being involved in any form of art is. I suppose Paul Baldwin was a man who was running the centre at the time, and he said they were so short of funds. So that was when the idea came to me that as we love music, we have a wonderful piano and a room that's big enough to have concerts, that instead of just doing it for our friends from time to time, I would, and it felt rather indulgent, you know, having people over and having musicians play. I thought this is a way we could convert this facility to something that would actually bring in some money for the centre. So that was when it started, about, I would say, 10 years ago. that we gradually started giving sums of money that we managed to raise at our concerts to Paul, and we started the pottery course. After a while, I realized that it really needed some guidance in how to spend the money, how to use it, and the concerts were beginning to take off, and we were having about 10 a year. So we decided to become a charity in our own right and then merge with Paul and what he was doing, because we'd managed to collect a sum of money that he wasn't using very effectively. So that was the birth of Maxability. Emile thought of the name, actually. We were trying to think of the right name, and he came up with that, and I thought it was very apt, because that is exactly what we were trying to do, to maximize the potential within disabled people who are as good as you and I, have the same desires, the same yearnings, but have great difficulty in expressing them because of the lack of facility and the lack of encouragement. I've got a very, very good pottery teacher, a young man from Romania, who grew up in his father's studio, and he really has a great knowledge of clay, and he inspires the people I work with a sense of, well, real purpose, I would say. You know, they're not just sitting there being disabled on benefits, but they are beginning to learn a skill. And I feel this is really the prime purpose of my charity, Maxability, to bring out, to maximize potential